My fellow panelist on the panel I was on that inspired me to do this video had really great advice. She said, I don't want to see white space on a resume. So that is a great way to determine if you should have 2 pages or not. If you're gonna have 1 1/4 pages and then 3/4 of a white page, you don't want that. That means you should trim some of your earlier stuff to make it just 1 page. Now, if your work experience is gonna put you onto 2 pages, but you are gonna have a little chunk of white at the bottom, that's kind of where I'm at with 10 years experience. Still, I have space. And so I think the next relevant section that you could put in there is something I call honors and awards. So this is a great place to brag. This is where I list 2 of the big honor societies I got into at my university. Even though I am many years out of college, I still have them on there because I do consider them high honors. For example, I am an Omicron Delta Kappa, and at my university that's a really big deal because it gets you a place on the fountain, we call it, and it's just a really high honor. So if you have something like that, if you have won major scholarships, if you've written papers that have won awards, if you're an Eagle Scout, if you're a gold award person from the Girl Scouts, I think that's a great place to put something like this. And it just shows you've done other things than just work and go to class. I think another important section, and this kind of depends on where you're at in your career. So for me, I call it volunteer activities, but I would say if you're maybe somebody who just graduated or still is in school, like leadership activities could be a good one. And this is a good place for you to list things like, do you have a leadership position in your sorority or fraternity, whether that be a social one or an academic one? Were you the captain of one of your college sports teams, whether that be the varsity team or the intramural team? For me, as somebody post-grad, I would not still have those items on my resume this far out. So instead, I have my volunteer activity. So what does volunteer activity look like for somebody maybe a few years out of college? I don't mean literally going to shelters or walking foster dogs, although that is great experience and you should definitely include that in a volunteer activities section. It can also include things you do in your spare time. So for example, I was in a sorority in college. It was a really big part of my undergrad career, and it was something I chose to continue being involved in as a grown-up. And I am the recruitment advisor for my old chapter, and so that is a pretty big time commitment. And so I like to show that I spend things not work-related. Ow, I just hit my elbow so hard. Similarly, I am on the local alumni board for my old university, as well as just being a lifetime member of the overall alumni association, which was a financial commitment. And so I like to include that as well, just to show some loyalty and some things that I do outside of my everyday job. And one of the biggest questions we got on this panel was a skills section, and maybe I shouldn't be doing my winged eyeliner to this section because it makes me a little angry, but we're gonna try. So the elusive skills section on a resume, I would say generally, I'm not a fan. I think a lot of people use it as a space filler and make themselves look silly in the process. And by that I mean, if you put Microsoft Suite, Google Suite, I just know you're trying to fill space and kind of waste my time reading this on your resume, because in the year 2024, anyone applying for jobs has used Microsoft Word, Microsoft Outlook, Gmail, and Google Drive. I fixed my wings. off camera because I was correct. And I messed them up talking about skill sections because they make me so angry. But all that being said, a skill section can be a valuable addition if you have actually interesting skills. What I mean by actually interesting skills are things that will actually set you apart from other people who are applying. So while everyone does know how to use Microsoft Word and Google Drive, not everyone has used certain software. So if you are an expert in Adobe Premiere, those types of things, and you're applying especially for, let's say, a press job, absolutely include that. If you have interned, for example, on Capitol Hill already, and you have utilized some of the software specific to working in an official office, I always go back to Intranet Quorum or IQ or other constituent tracking service applications, then absolutely include that. Similarly, if you are fluent in a language or even conversationally able to speak another language, especially Spanish, absolutely include that in your skill section. A really good example I use for this is we hired a staff assistant not because he could speak Arabic, but because it was something that just set him apart in the application process. And then one day, when I was working there, we had a phone call come in from a constituent who only spoke a very specific dialect of Arabic. And while he didn't speak that specific dialect, he spoke close enough to it that he was actually able to help her get what she needed. And that was something that reflected really well on the office that he was working for. So languages, specific software, and maybe you know all those cool tips and tricks in Excel, then I would say something like elevated Excel experience, higher knowledge of Excel. If there's specific things you do in Excel, those are great things to include. But otherwise, if your skills begin and end with Microsoft and Google, it's okay to just not have that section, and actually will make you look better than putting that and looking silly. Another often debated part of resumes is an objective. This is something some people put at the top of their resumes. I personally, in my hiring experience, continue to think that they are a space filler. I think they are something you include when you don't have anything more interesting to put on your resume. Because frankly, let's be honest, especially at the entry level, everyone's objective is to get a job. And I don't think you need to state that on your resume when you could be sharing something more unique that could set you apart in the resume and interview process. So I feel like I just said a lot of words and I didn't even get into what you should write on your resume. So maybe I can do that separately. All of what I just said being said, in conclusion, in terms of the setup of your resume, keep it clean, keep it simple, keep it concise. Your cover letter is an opportunity for you to show more of your personality. So your resume should just be a quick, clean show of your skills and experience that a hiring manager can look at in a few seconds and decide if they want to bring you in for an interview.